Hey everyone, welcome to our next panel of presentations from Miriam, Helen, and Emily. We've got three great presentations on three really interesting and important topics. As the presentations go, please feel free to put comments and questions in the chat. We're going to do the three presentations and then we'll have a question and answer period at the end. So feel free to drop questions, comments, and feedback in the chat and we'll filter them into the discussion afterwards. So again, thanks everybody who's tuning in live. And with that, Miriam, if you'd like to share your screen, Emily, Helen, and I will turn our cameras off. And once you're ready, feel free to take it away.
All right. Just share. All right. Can you see?
Yep, I see your title slide. Yep, I see your title slide full screen.
Okay, awesome. All right, so my project is about Palestinian culture. I did a modern rendition of a folktale called Jibna. So the reason that I wanted to do this project is because my dad is actually Palestinian, but living in America and not really presenting as a Palestinian. I feel kind of disconnected from my culture. I don't know a ton about it aside from what my parents do tell me. So I wanted to use this capstone project as a chance to learn more about it. And I did an expert interview with my dad and learned a ton about the culture, a lot about like my grandparents and like stories that I didn't know, which were super interesting to hear. But also just learning about the culture itself was really awesome. So aside from just learning about it myself, I also took some surveys. I took a survey of mainly people around my age, predominantly female, but some male in there as well, and mainly white and Caucasian, with some other ethnicities as well. So from this group, the majority didn't seem to know a lot about Palestine, to be honest. What they did know was mainly stuff that they heard on the news or maybe in school about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which was something that my dad brought up as well too. So the focus on Palestine in general isn't really about the people at all. It's about the land and who's going to own it and fighting over it. And that's really all we hear as Americans about Palestine. So I wanted to put a different spin on that. And I wanted to really make this project be about the people, not about kind of the fight over the land, even though it is a really important part of the culture and like something that can't just be forgotten about. But I kind of wanted to take a step away from it for this project at least. So I did do some research about like the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, mainly just looking into news sources and kind of just reaffirming that, yeah, mainly sources do come from like the Israeli side and just showing like, at least in terms of American news, just showing like kind of like the violence that goes on in the country and kind of putting Palestinians in a bad light, to be honest. So kind of moving away from that, I wanted to shift my topic into something that my parents told me about. This book called Speak Bird, Speak Again is a collection of Palestinian Arab folktales. It's a really amazing collection. They took and like translated a bunch of different folktales from a bunch of different storytellers in Palestine, native storytellers. And it's really amazing. And the story that I focused on is Jibna. And so another reason that I wanted to do a folktale is because folktales are kind of how Palestinians can pass on their heritage, seeing as how with Israel kind of taking over the land, the heritage is kind of being taken over and disappearing, but folktales are a way to do that. So Jibna is essentially about this girl who she is just like really beautiful and the envy of all the other girls in the town. So they end up like playing a prank on her, and then she ends up like kind of hating her beauty because of that and wanting to move away from it. So I wanted to take that story and turn it into a more modern rendition. Here's a little sneak peek of my storyboard. I didn't want to show too much, but this is the little splash page that I made for our like section 4 page. You can see some of the storyboard in there. So I wanted to make this shift into like a social media direction, mainly because I felt like my audience, my target audience, could really connect with it, or really anyone can connect with it nowadays because a lot of like almost everyone uses social media. I also wanted to focus on family because my dad said, and as I know as well, family is a huge part of the culture. And I also wanted to push back against the stereotype of women being oppressed, which I think is still a common held stereotype today. So I'll just play my video now, and then I'll give comments afterwards. Can you hear any audio or no?
No, I don't hear any audio right now.
Okay. Maybe
There's if you don't mind, there's a button right before you share that can you can
I think
your audio also. Yeah.
I think I got it. Thank you. All right, so here we go.
Yep.
Does it play now? Okay. All right, so I'll just go over kind of like what the message I was trying to give. The beginning, I start with an olive tree because it's kind of the sign of resilience and resistance of Palestine, because these trees can survive in Palestine, and it's also a big part of the economy there. And this bird here is a Palestinian sunbird. It's a national bird of Palestine. And then, so here I have comments of like, these are common things that like people will say to people wearing hijab, like, can I see your hair? Does your dad make you wear that? And stuff like that. And so Jibna kind of feels like she almost like doesn't want to be a part of the culture because she has to face all of these hateful comments. So she takes her hijab off, not because anybody's forcing her to in her family, but because she doesn't want to, because of like kind of like the outer culture. And then her mom kind of comforts her here, showing that importance of family. This is a little clip of how to make grape leaves, which is actually like my favorite like Arabic Palestinian dish. So I wanted to do a little homage to that. And tea, which is also a big part of the culture, and having tea with your family and just chatting and talking is a big part as well. So afterwards, so like throughout that, she kind of realizes that she does like love her culture and she doesn't really care what other people say about it, and she's gonna wear her hijab if she wants to. So yeah. And then this little part at the end where it says, "This is my story, I've told it, and in your hands I leave it," is something that they say a lot at the end of like folk tales. So that's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Miriam.
Thank
Great
you.
work. All right. So next up we have Helen. So Helen, if you want to start sharing your screen, and everyone else who's watching live, please feel free to throw comments and questions into the chat as we go. We'll introduce them into the QA session at the end. So Helen, if you're ready, you can share your screen, and then Emily and Miriam and I will turn our cameras off.
Oops, sorry. Yep. Now, I'll just back to the top. All right. And please bear with me today. Of course, it's finals week and I have a cold, so I found it a little congested, but hopefully you can hear everything okay. Thank you so much for coming to the presentation today. And I'm going to be talking about Jumuiya everywhere. And before I start talking about that, I'll just give a little bit more information about who I am and where this project really came from. And so this is a picture of my sister and I when we were really tiny, but it highlights, the journey that we had living in Uganda. Our mom's Ugandan, our dad's American, and so the different ways that we connected and understood our culture through two very different perspectives, and also different feelings of belonging and understanding that came along with that. And so, really coming to Iowa and going to university here is the first time that I was beginning to reckon with these different feelings and being so far away from home. And one project where I got to work on in my screen printing class, where this really came together for me, was a project that I called Matoke and Fish. And so Matoke is a very traditional Ugandan dish. And throughout this screen print here, you can see all types of traditional Ugandan food, from chapati to fish, because we live right next to the lake. And when I created this project, it was one of the first times that I really began thinking about and addressing my Ugandan identity through art. And it was a wonderful way to share these understandings and foods with other people in my community as well who didn't share these identities. And so as I progressed and continued forward, I was trying to find a way to bring this understanding even further. And this is where the idea Jumuiya Everywhere comes from. Jumuiya Everywhere means kinship or community everywhere. It's in Swahili, which is a language spoken all over East Africa. And I wanted to work on this project to hear from other East Africans living in Iowa how they had found and created community so far away from home, and what strategies they were using to continue that sense of belonging. And so throughout this project, I had conversations with 10 East Africans living in Iowa from all different ages and experiences and backgrounds, from migrating here to moving with their families when they were really little. But each of these conversations was extremely powerful and had a really large impact on me. We talked about all kinds of things, and I started reflecting on my own experiences and my understandings of Ugandan culture as a multiracial woman, and also just a sense of acceptance that I had from everybody that I talked to as they were vulnerable with me, and I was able to be vulnerable in return, and discuss so many things that were important to us about our homes. And the challenge after this was trying to figure out how to incorporate all of these powerful postcards, or all of these powerful narratives, into postcards. And so this is a time lapse of me printing, many hours spent in the studio, as I tried to work through different abstract patterns. That was the method that I found that best addressed each of their stories in a way that captured the traditional African printmaking techniques for creating fabric. And so this was a way to integrate all the different parts of their identities without focusing on specific aspects. And so along with that, these are some of the things along the way, from the transparencies I created in the marker to all the different colors that I mixed. And then these are the layers that were created as each part that I added to the story that was being told about each person, their identity, their families, and the people that they had met and connected with in Iowa. And then these stories were able to be incorporated into an exhibition. So I'm calling it the first exhibition because I plan for it to be one of many. Throughout this project, the way that the people I talked to were impacted, and then the way the community learned and heard from their stories, because each of the postcards has a quotation along with it on the wall, really highlighted the need for us to have more shared understandings cross-culturally and continue dialogue in this way. And this realization led me to the second part of this project. And I began asking a lot of questions. And one question that really stuck with me was, how might we cultivate empowering and accessible experiences for community members in Ames and members of the African diaspora? And so highlighting some specific words in there, trying to find different ways to bring people together, recognize experiences, and celebrate those experiences in community. Throughout this process, I needed to have a better understanding of how I was going to even begin accomplishing this, and especially because I wanted to do it through art. And so Chloe Alexander and Brenda Jones are two very accomplished artists, each in their own field with deep ways of knowing. And Chloe Alexander specifically works a lot with community outreach and advocacy. And so I wanted to talk to her to understand how this could be a community event and really engage a lot of different members around in Ames. I also talked to folks at the university museums here in Ames and at Iowa State, as well as talking to and hearing more about the Museum of African Art in the University of Iowa, to really understand how art in a setting like that would be different than what we were trying to cultivate with the community, and also how their strategies could be integrated in what we were doing. I then created a brand. So this is the brand of Jumuiya Everywhere. All the colors were inspired by different powerful and warm tones across the Sahara. So again, just tying back that element of culture and across the space. And now I've been working on a social media campaign. This social media campaign has been a chance for me to really step outside of my comfort zone and engage community members in a variety of different ways. So having a discussion, for example, outside Parks Library that I'll talk about more in a second, and just being able to really share more about the work and the mission of this project to get more people involved. And then making sure that throughout this project, it was really important to hear what the community thought and have their input as we progress forward to think about what this event would look like in person, like I said, as a celebration of different identities and aims. And so then as a part of this too, making sure that we were asking people to reflect not only on how they could see different identities being celebrated connected to the African diaspora, but what important parts there are about their cultural heritage that they haven't considered. And then also making sure that we were considering challenges like tokenization or harmful representations that are not ways that community members would prefer to be represented. This is an example of the display and discussion, stopping outside Parks Library and really just talking to people as they walk by and asking them what kind of event that they would attend and what they would want to learn about. And one of the most powerful things that somebody said is that, you know, we're all human, and while some people might live farther away than others from where we started, I want to learn about their experiences and I want to understand what's important to them and where they came from. And the other part of this too was being able to integrate AR along with this project. So for the sake of time, I don't have a demonstration of that today, but this shirt, for example, has AR integrated. So as somebody is walking around, that can be scanned and have more information about the project, ways to get engaged and build better understanding and awareness around it. And so the next step on this project is to go even bigger than we currently have. And so being able to talk to the Ames Chamber of Commerce for events, talking to the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, specifically the Iowa Arts Council, and being able to apply for grants to make this happen, and then the Ames Commission of Arts as well. And all of this is coming together because in order to create community and facilitate conversations around people's awareness and then eventually shape innovative and sustainable change, we really do need to engage the community in a number of different ways. And art is one of the ways that we can do that. So, thank you very much.
All right, great work, Helen. Powerful topic. Excellent. All right, so if you want to unshare your screen, next up we have Emily. So Emily, if you want to start sharing your screen. And again, for anyone who's tuning in live, feel free to drop comments and questions in the chat. And then following Emily's presentation, we'll all come back together and we'll have the Q&A portion of the panel. So Emily, if you want to.
Definitely, just making sure I get everything all set to go.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay,
and then Miriam and Helen and I will turn our cameras off.
Oops, let's move back here. Okay, so hi, I'm Emily White, and today I'm going to be talking about my senior graphic design capstone project, which is a look into feminism, reclaiming your power. And so at the beginning of this semester, I was in a women and gender studies class, and throughout this class, we covered a wide array of topics, from how women are held to a double standard in their sexuality, and along with how men are trying to escape the toxic societal standards. And that realization and those TED Talks and articles really lit a fire in myself. And so with this project, my main question and goal was, how can I light a fire in others about feminism? And so as I was getting into my process, I quickly realized that feminism is connected to everything. And I was like, oh crap. So one way to work with this is I sketched and created to digest all of the information and talks and articles that I was reading for this project. And there's some of those right here. But from this sketching and creating, I kind of created a little side project for this capstone, which is a zine or a flip book, which I'm going to be showing you now. And so with this little zine, I wanted to be able to touch on all these different topics that my main project was not getting at, because these were things that really stuck out to me and that I felt was quite important. And so throughout the zine, it features a wide variety of different points relating to the topic of feminism, as well as just like some of my experiences throughout the semester and how women are still objectified and sexualized today. And one of the biggest takeaways is that feminism is for everyone. And so I really wanted to like showcase that in this scene. And another way that I wanted to do this was to break those negative stereotypes about feminism. And I created a series of stickers in relation to the zine to put out in the community. So the next slide is going to be a video talking about that.
Hey everyone, so right now I am out putting stickers in the Iowa State community because I wanted a way to spark conversations and provoke thought about the topics that I'm covering in my capstone project, as well as breaking those negative stereotypes about feminism. So let's go. Okay everyone, stickers are placed around campus. They're not, but I'm super excited about them. So let's go check them out and get back to my presentation.
So here are the series of stickers that I created, and they just highlight the main points that I felt was really important from my research in this project. And as you noticed in the end of that video, there was a weird little black box that popped onto my face. And that brings us into the main section of my capstone project, which is called Speak Highly. And as I was doing this project, I really wanted to look at a way that women, as well as anyone else, can kind of reclaim their power. And one way that was very prominent to me is the way that you speak about yourself. And the next video that I'm going to show you is kind of a promo video that talks about this little filter that I created to highlight and comment on how important it is to choose the words that you're using to speak about yourself and make sure that those words are positive, because how you speak about yourself does matter.
Hi, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm doing good, thanks. I'm sorry to be a bother, but I'm just so excited about this opportunity and I can't wait to get started. Hi, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I'm sorry. I'm s- I'm s- well, I don't want to be a I'm just so excited to be included in this opportunity and I appreciate you reaching out. I cannot wait to get started.
And so with this video, I wanted to kind of play with this idea that we're all interacting in this digital space right now. And so I thought creating a video chat plugin would be one of the best ways to kind of like comment on that speech about yourself. And so along with that video, I created a handful of like promotional materials such as posters, as well as a Snapchat filter to kind of like get this idea out into the community and out into the world. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming to the presentation and listening to me speak. And I hope that in the future, you think more carefully about how you talk about yourself, because it really makes a big difference. Thank you.
All right. Great work, Emily. Thank you. Great work, all three of you. So yeah, if everyone will turn their cameras back on, we've got a few questions in the chat. And so I wanted to go first to, oh my gosh, we got so many compliments. I need to scroll back up because I lost the question. Here we go. So the first question, and this is from Miriam. So this is from Eric. And he says, your animation has such a great style. What was the biggest challenge you overcame while working on this project?
I think like the biggest challenge was just learning, I guess, my limits and learning like what I can like kind of do to get around them. So like I originally wanted to do a full-on like 2D animation and like colored and everything like that. And like just like as I was working, I realized that it wouldn't really be possible, at least at this time frame. So I thought about other ways that I could like kind of get my message across. So I thought about putting in like stock imagery and stock video. And I also did some rotoscoping throughout my video as well to help with that. So yeah.
Nice. And I know you tried a few different things and you sketched and you storyboarded a lot through your process. And I think the way that you brought it all together works really well in terms of like the narrative and the relationship of the assets and things like that. Very engaging. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Helen. So number of comments about the loving the font choices, loving the forms, things like that. You mentioned in your presentation that the forms, the ones that began from silk screening and then became layered up and integrated into the postcards came from stories. I was wondering if you'd be willing to share one of those stories that maybe stood out to you and how that specific set of forms came together.
Absolutely. And so one of them that was really powerful was a story that somebody told about during the pandemic. They had just Iowa right before, and throughout the pandemic, they had to stay with a roommate of theirs. And so the story that they told was about how the level of understanding and awareness and love that they received during that time when it was so needed for them was life-changing, and that they hadn't anticipated it or expected it, but the way that it impacted their life made such a huge impact. And so, but then also, as I was starting to work on the pattern for this person, their energy was very calm and peaceful. And so that contrasted with their excitement and emphasis on the impact that that experience had on them. For that specific postcard, I created a wash of different blue tones, and those were contrasted with almost sunburst patterns in the background, still also in blue. And then on top of that, I had waving rivers of red that represented the energy and the emotion that had come from that friendship and that was continuing throughout that person's life. And so really trying to make sure that I was using contrasting colors, because that's also prominent in a lot of African fabrics, in addition with those different symbols to create those patterns.
And they came together really well. So just being able to hear even that little bit more about how it is this combination of history and culture and an individual experience. There's a lot of power in the way that that creates then a visual narrative. And so then Emily, again, this idea of like process and sketching, you early on, you mentioned it in your presentation, came to this like collaging as a way to process some of the things you were experiencing. You had a couple of like maybe specific turning points, both from what you were learning from this other class, which sounds amazing, into these experiences that you were having, sort of in real life. And so I was wondering if you'd share a little bit more about that process as like a parallel sketch or even like idea generation process.
Yes, definitely. And so one thing that really kind of inspired that and guided me through that was you mentioning using sketch as a form of thinking and a way to work through your work. And so that was really helpful for me this semester. And so I had one experience where I was listening to the radio, and it was quite a shocking remark the host made, objectifying a woman. And this was a few months ago, and I was quite upset about it. And so I ended up just collaging and sketching some graphics for that. And that kind of turned into this whole thing of trying to visually represent these different ideas that I was learning about and also experiencing throughout this semester.
Yeah, nice. And the just the way that you processed that reaction through your work, I think was really valuable, and it had a positive impact on the positive impact that you're trying to have in the world. So all three of your projects are in some way about translating experience. And so I was wondering if you could each talk a little bit about some of the specific challenges of that. So Miriam, like specifically, what were some of the challenges with translating the experiences that you discussed? I know early on you mentioned it in your presentation. It was a statement that resonated with me early in your research, is that in terms of media and general knowledge, we mostly know about the land. We don't really know about the people. And so translating that experience was really important to your process. What was one of the challenges there?
It was really hard to just get away from it, to be honest. Like, just as I was doing research, that's what always came up, even if I wasn't intending it. And like, obviously, it's not something that should just be forgotten about. Like, it's definitely something that people need to know about, and that affects the lives of a lot of Palestinians. But yeah, I just really wanted to show people that like Palestinians and Arabs as well, like, are just everyday people. They're not like all like terrorists or like trying to, I don't know, fight Israel or whatever. Whatever your stance on that is, I wanted to just like get the point across that they're people just like you and me. And I thought I could kind of accomplish that by doing an animation. So that's kind of why I took it in that direction and wanted to take it away from kind of the violence of like the conflict. So yeah.
Yeah, and that was important early on, and I think you did a nice job of that by focusing on the folk tales. That seemed like a really interesting decision as a way to move that forward. How about you, Helen? So actually, Helen, I want to dovetail this into a question that's in the chat, which is, how did learning about others' experiences in the African diaspora change your perspective about your own experiences?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I guess to answer the first one, some of the challenges throughout the project was how personal everybody's stories were. And as I mentioned, the impact they had on me, which I'll go into again, and then also just the sense of all of those experiences culminating in, an hour and a half. And so trying to then translate those, like you said, into ways that other people would be experiencing them. And so I really found that abstraction was a way that I was able to touch on each of the different energies and then the emotions of their conversation and then that culture without reducing it to a specific representation that I had chosen in regard to their story. And so that's where abstraction and then also reflecting on African patterned fabric as a way to do that was really important for me. And then for that second question, it was really interesting just conversations. I have really struggled sometimes living in Iowa with the exceptions from other East Africans, by being multiracial and then also, sounding the way that I do. I'm not always identified as Ugandan. I'm usually the one that will ask somebody where they're from and mention that I'm Ugandan to establish comfort because they might not recognize that in me. And so going into this conversation, I was worried that that would be it again, that people would be unsure of my identities or maybe ask me questions, ask me to prove myself. But that wasn't the case at all. And so I learned a lot about the nuances of Ugandan culture, for example, or other parts of East Africa that I wasn't aware of because I hadn't had those experiences, or because I was so scared of putting myself out there. And so on a personal level, I've grown so much, and I'm so grateful for having talked to all these people.
Yeah, wonderful. It makes for a very rich and exciting output with potential moving into the future, which you sort of alluded to at the end of your presentation. Really great work. And how about you, Emily? Because like you mentioned several times in your presentation, but also as we worked through this, that the translation of experience was not just your own. You were processing your own, but some of the things that you were learning about were also forcing you to try to be empathetic towards others' experiences within a similar space, but still different from your own. How were some of the challenges within that?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest challenges was just making sure that those visuals were reading clearly and getting the message that I wanted to communicate across, because a lot of the times, I'm so focused and, you're seeing your project super close up. And so it was definitely important to work and rework when things weren't exactly communicating what I needed to do, and to also open myself up and allow myself to view kind of the world of feminism from different people's viewpoints, because like I said in my presentation, feminism isn't just for women or a certain group of women. It is for everyone, no matter your gender, age, race. So
Yeah, great. Thanks, Emily. So Miriam, I have a question for you from the chat, and this is from Emily. It says, "What animators? What animators influence you?" And I would add on to that even like animation styles and things like that.
Yeah, so I'm into anime. So I really like Studio Ghibli, of course. Their animation is amazing and just like so beautiful. Another studio that I really like is Kyoto Animation. Same thing, just like very beautiful. Like I just how everything like flows and stuff is so great. Something that like pretty much all anime studios do, and like maybe other studios too, is they like will animate food and it just like looks so good. It's like, this looks better than real food. I want to eat this. So like I was kind of inspired by that when I was making my animation. That's why I like kind of include the grape leaves thing in there. So yeah, I like cartoons too, just like all kinds of like 2D animation, to be honest. So yeah.
Yeah, great. And you can see how you drew from that in your development of this sort of final direction of the line drawings, working with the photographs. There's something really engaging about how those elements are both like familiar, but also then something that you've given us a fresh and different perspective on by combining them. And I think you did a really, really nice job of pulling those things together. So Helen, there's a comment in the feed that says, the ways that you engaged your work with the community were so thoughtful and impactful. Great job. And that's from Olivia. One of the things that I think really adds to that is the fact that you took this work out of the gallery, out of the studio, and like went to the streets and you met people where they are. And in a way, that kind of crosses this boundary into like public art, or maybe even like performance art in a way where you're presenting it in kind of a guerrilla fashion. What was that experience like, and how was it received?
Yes, I really appreciate those comments. And it was a little bit of a challenge. I have tabled events before as a part of organizations on campus or other things like that, but it was my first time having a table and showing my work in that way without being part of a structured event. And so trying to get people to pause in their daily flow of walking to a class or navigating to wherever they needed to go to talk about the project was a challenge. But once we started talking, their level of understanding and their willingness to also, reflect on their own experiences connected to their understanding of the African diaspora and beyond was really powerful. And their willingness to ask for what they wanted to learn about, or the opportunities that they saw for an event in Ames. And so, like you said, that really is the ultimate goal currently of the project, would be to have an event in Ames, potentially in downtown, and engage with different members in a whole lot of different ways, and also have that as a physical manifestation, like you said, of the project, so that it is present whether you're aware of it or not. That day in Ames, we're learning about the African diaspora, we're celebrating different parts of that identity. And so I'm really excited to make that happen.
That's great. And what a wonderful like culmination, or I guess like next point in the trajectory, where each of these things becomes like a prototype for the next thing. And I really appreciate that you're involving other people along the way. You're building these experiences so that many different folks can relate to them, but at the same time, it really is focused on the benefit of the community that you've defined. Nice work. So Emily, there's a question in here about the colors that you chose. Did you choose more muted tones to help provide more focus on the message? So could you talk just a little bit about how you chose some of your colors and formal elements?
Yeah, definitely. So the biggest aspect for me was that when people discuss feminism, like throughout my research and talking with my professor, a lot of people usually shut down because it's kind of a touchy topic, especially for people that don't think they fall into the general stereotypical feminist category. And so I really wanted to use colors that were eye-catching and trending right now, as well as bold typography to be able to grab people's attention and make it look pleasing, and then to get that message across. And so I didn't want people to just kind of like turn off right away, I guess, when they saw feminism. I wanted them to still be interested. And so I tried to communicate that through the colors.
Yeah, great. And I think you did a nice job of like synthesizing that all together so that it does remain very approachable. So there's a great comment in here from Jenna. It says, I really want to commend all of you for your projects. The connection of your personal identities and passion for your subject was very clearly exemplified in your presentations. So thinking of this idea of that personal connection, if you can kind of rewind back to the very beginning, I'm wondering if there was kind of a point where you knew that this was what you needed to work on, and if you could just reflect on that for a moment. So Miriam, was there a moment where you kind of like took a deep breath and were like, yep, I'm going to make this like project that I'm personally connected to?
Yeah, for sure. Like I've kind of said, I'm not like super connected to my culture, like at least the Palestinian side. And I like don't really think about it on a day-to-day basis. So when I was thinking about doing my capstone initially, it like wasn't even on my mind. And then I don't know, I just like felt like when we were talking about stuff that we like thinking like doing something that we like really wanted to learn more about, and it just like, I don't know, it just came to me, and I was like, I need to know about this, and this would be a really like fun and exciting way to do it. So that was how it was for me.
Mm-hmm. Nice. How about you, Helen?
Yeah, I really appreciate the way that you said, Miriam, that you needed to know about this. That's very much how I felt as I was, trying to figure out who to talk to, and bringing that conversation larger than myself and even larger than my family and people that I knew on a personal level was, there's other parts of the experience of being East African out there. And so wanting to hear all of those stories. And for me, it really started, it was about, I think, 11 p.m. and I was in studio and I didn't really know what to do. And I just started scribbling on the whiteboard all these different ideas. And it was about connecting with people. It was about art. It was about African identity. And then eventually it all came together. And that realization that I had the opportunity to create a project about exactly what I wanted, and then also bring in the aspect of other people's experiences, not only with the people that I talked to, but then as we progress to having an event in person, having those conversations with the community as well, so that hopefully everybody has been considered in all these different ways, and the understanding created along the process and eventually builds on all of that work. And so that was really powerful to realize that I was able to do that.
Yeah, nice. I like this idea. Emily, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate what Miriam and Helen are saying, that something that we kind of need to know about. And so throughout my class, I was getting exposed to these different viewpoints of feminism, and from the intersectional approach. So like age, race, sexuality, and how feminism looks so different for people when they fall into different social categories. And so that really drives me to want to learn more about that, and to also just start conversations about that. And yeah, at the beginning of the semester, I was just like, wow, I can't believe like I didn't know this before. And so I really wanted to use this project to, I guess, kind of like create those moments for other people as well.
Yeah, nice. And Emily, right along those same points, there's another question in the chat for you. And it says, did you find sources that you can share that could teach others to learn how to break the habit of negative self-talk? Being aware that we do it is the first step, but then what are the next things that people should do?
Definitely, yeah. And so while this project was definitely the main focus was on just like being aware of that, I think that negative self-talk also kind of spills into the mental health area, and just knowing your own self-worth. And so I think the best thing that I've read about is the practicing of it. And so recognizing it is a big thing, but then practicing it and putting into practice is kind of that next step.
Yeah, great. And Helen, a question about the ways in which you move through your project. There's a question in the chat about the idea of like expanding your message in different ways versus traditional design, but maybe through the lens of traditional graphic design. So could you talk about that a little bit, about the sort of like different spaces that your work operates in, and how you approach that?
Absolutely. And so the work itself, screen printing being definitely a very physical process of printmaking, where pushing ink through a screen. But then as that connects to some of the traditional methods of graphic design, and the other things I was thinking of are, how are we interacting, with this project potentially digitally? So thinking about that, like I said, through the social media campaign, where people are in their spaces and being able to then engage in ways that they feel comfortable virtually before potentially moving into that physical space and having interactions and conversations in person. And then also on top of that, just thinking about AR as a feature that I really wanted to integrate. And so as I experimented with that on shirts and then a few other applications, that as well was designing things like stickers that were physical, but then how we were interacting with them on our phones and as aspects of technology as well, which also was really interesting in how that's a personal space that we are having that understanding in before moving into that community space or having further conversations. So it was really important for me to use traditional graphic design in a lot of the digital methods of this project that were connected to those initial physical applications.
Yeah, nice. And similar question for you, Miriam, then. Your topic was incredibly complicated, and you chose a really wonderful lens through which to view it, which is this folk tale. And then the product became illustration and animation. So how do you take those things with the idea of traditional graphic design as part of your process and move it into a space for people to relate to?
Yeah. So at the start, I guess I didn't really, I knew I wanted to do like an animation, but I didn't really know like how I wanted to do it. So like I did consider like motion graphics, and like I think like it kind of did like, while I didn't use motion graphics exactly, I kind of used that like idea as like inspiration for like using like stock stuff and like putting like illustration and animation on top of it. Also just like, I don't know, making it something that people are like interested in, like Helen mentioned, like the social media aspect. So like I use that as a way to like kind of like bring people in, which you kind of like gave me the tip on doing, because like everybody can like kind of relate to that. And that was like kind of a great way to like bring this like connection. Whereas like some people might like not really feel, if I had just like jumped in and just like went like all hard with the, this is the culture and this is all everything about it, I think people might have been overwhelmed. So I kind of had to, or like wanted to take it more slowly in a way that would be more digestible. So like starting with that like social media kind of introduction, I think really helped with that. So yeah.
Yeah, great. And then Emily, similar question, but the question in the chat is, what do you think of the idea that the most powerful way to communicate your project might be video performance art, like what you did with that demonstration, versus quote unquote traditional graphic design?
Definitely. Honestly, I was quite excited by it because it kind of went into this like speculative critical design thinking. And especially, as I mentioned in my presentation, in this day and age, we are all on Zoom as we are right now. And so I think it's kind of a format that we all have gotten a little bit used to in terms of talking. And so I think there's an intriguing aspect to that, being able to have it as a video format, and then also more accessible to people all over the place rather than just a specific location.
Nice. So now in the last couple of minutes, I want to go around one more time, and I want to ask everybody, what is your biggest success from this project? Number one. And number two, if you can distill down the takeaway that you want people to walk away with from your work, what would those things be? So Miriam, we'll start with you. Biggest success, and then a distilled down takeaway.
I think my biggest success was just making the animation in general. I've never really made an animation like to that scale. I've made like short little GIFs, but I've never done something. It wasn't like crazy long or anything, but it's something I'm like really proud of doing or having done. And then like, I guess the main takeaway is just like be open to learning about other cultures, not only like Palestinian culture. I think just like being willing to listen and just willing to hear what people have to say and hear about their experiences, and not just like kind of staying in your own little world, is just like, it's really eye-opening. And I'm really glad that I had a chance to do that through this project.
Great. I'm glad you took on the challenge of the animation, and that's a wonderful takeaway. How about you, Helen?
Definitely for me, it was getting out of my comfort zone. Both words, taking on a project that felt at some times was unachievable, and then being able to be in a gallery as a result and have it there, as well as social media. That has been something that's been really challenging for me to post and put my work out there, but posting it as a part of this project, and because of how important it was for me to get the message out there, made it more manageable to work through those feelings and create the campaign as it currently is. And I think a distilled takeaway would be to ask family members and people you know about your culture, where you're from, and different parts of your history. Because as I was talking to all these people, and like I said, all the wonderful realizations that I had, I realized there are certain questions I haven't asked my mom, or I haven't asked my uncles and aunts. And so that as well was a realization, just how much knowledge they have. And so making sure to talk to them about it while we can.
Yeah, that's great. That's a wonderful takeaway. And yeah, to your success, we really didn't get too much into the vulnerability necessary to be sharing and asking those kinds of things on social media, especially as designers, as you're putting these messages out into space. So that's wonderful. I'm really excited that you took it on and pushed yourself in that way. How about you, Emily?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge or struggle for me throughout this project was definitely the wide range of feminism and trying to like dive into what I specifically wanted to do. That was definitely a struggle in the beginning, but ended up working out really well. And then I have two little takeaways. So one is that feminism is about equality for all. And I think just plain and simple, that's really important. And the second is that I would hope that everyone thinks about speaking highly about themselves, because you are worth it.
Great. All three great messages. Okay, that takes us right to time. So Miriam, Helen, Emily, thank you so much for your presentations, wonderful projects, and also just thanks for your work this semester. Thank you for being in my section. It was a true pleasure to work through your projects with you and be along for the ride. You made great work, and I'm really excited to see where you go next and the kind of things that you do. So thank you, the three of you, for being here and for your thoughtful work, your thoughtful presentations. Thanks to everybody who's tuning in. Thank you for the questions and the comments if you're watching this live. If you are watching this live, the next panel is this afternoon at 4 o'clock Central Time. The link to it is in the description for this video. So be there at 4 o'clock and we'll be talking about branding design. But again, I just wanted to say thank you for everybody watching. Thank you, Emily, Helen, and Miriam, for your work. It was awesome working with you this semester. Have a good rest of your day and good luck on the rest of your finals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.